All right. So, week 9, Monday, have some new vocabulary for you. And then we will start part 3 of Fahrenheit 451. So, first up, words. So, vocabulary 3 begins with incognito. Very fun word to say. And it describes the act of being disguised or hidden in some capacity. So, maybe you are literally going incognito by dressing up as someone else or dressing up in nondescript clothing. Perhaps you are going incognito some other way, but some sort of disguise that is meant to conceal identity. The second one, circuitous. If you are describing something as circuitous, it is not direct. It is not to the point, not straightforward. So that could be directions. So rather than giving very, straightforward directions, if you take someone in the exact opposite direction and then, very complicated path through an unnecessary area and then get them to where they're going, then that would not be a direct path, obviously. Could refer to conversation. If someone just isn't getting to the point, then their conversation is a bit circuitous, indirect. So the third one, cajole. A goal that you have quite often, to persuade. So if you're trying to cajole someone, just trying to kind of nudge them in the right direction. It's a gentle persuasion. You're not necessarily bashing them over the head with facts and figures. You're just oh, come on. Yeah, it's fine. You could do this. It's going to be okay. So just kind of nudging them in the right direction. The fourth one, pensive. Describes someone who is thoughtful and reflective. And I mean thoughtful as in literally full of thoughts. Not quite so much in the, oh, you're so thoughtful kind of way, but literally someone who thinks a lot and reflects deeply upon their life. The fifth one, deluge, describes a flood. This could be a literal flood or a metaphorical one. So I could be drowning under a deluge of papers that I have to grade this weekend. Or it could be, quite literally, lots and lots of water, Noah's Ark, flood. The sixth one, indigent, is a synonym for destitute that we had a little bit ago. So indigent also means very poor, struggling to get by, mired in a lifetime of poverty. The seventh one, quite the opposite. Something that is lucrative is money-making. So if you describe someone as lucrative, just keep in mind you're describing them as money-making. It doesn't necessarily mean they're rich. It just means that they're profitable in some way, shape, or form. Most often you'll hear lucrative used to describe businesses or ideas or professions. Being a lawyer is a lucrative career. The eighth one, diaphanous, describes something that is transparent, really more even translucent. Maybe I'll add that definition. Something that you can see through, but only just. A lot of times it's used to describe fabric. So maybe you have some diaphanous curtains to filter some of the harsh light out of your room. Or your prom dress has diaphanous sleeves so you can see through to your arms. The ninth one, arduous, describes something difficult. It is just hard. It's just not easy. It is something that is a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of time. It is usually not fun. And the 10th one, nebulous. This is the exact opposite of limpid that we had a little bit ago, typically used to describe kind of the mental unclearness. Not so much I can't see through it, but usually it's used to describe confusion. So if you say something is nebulous, typically that means it's confusing, it's unclear, it's puzzling in some way. That's the most common usage. So there's your words. And as you saw, I had the Part 3 questions for Fahrenheit 451. There are a couple of textual evidence questions there. So don't worry about those right now. We need to get started on Part 3. So Part 3 starts on page 52, and we're going to go to this paragraph on page 58. So when you see something about a gas station, It's time to stop. The title of Part 3 is Burning Bright. And you could probably take some reasonable guesses about what might be burning bright in this section, because we are at Montag's house and it seems like Beatty's onto him. It's not just a coincidence. They happen to show up at his house. It's not the neighbor across the street whose house they're burning. It is Montag's house. So let's see if we can figure out who turned in Mr. Montag. Lights flicked on, and house doors opened all down the street to watch the carnival set up. Montag and Beatty stared, one with dry satisfaction, the other with disbelief, at the house before them, this main ring in which torches would be juggled and fire eaten. "Well," said Beatty, "now you did it. Old Montag wanted to fly near the sun, and now that he's burnt his damn wings, he wonders why. Didn't I hint enough when I sent the hound around your place?" Montag's face was entirely numb and featureless. He felt his head turn like a stone carving to the dark place next door, set in its bright border of flowers. Beatty snorted. "Oh, no. You weren't fooled by that little idiot's routine, now were you? Flowers, butterflies, leaves, sunsets. Oh, hell, it's all in her file. I'll be damned, I've hit the bullseye. Look at the sick look on your face. A few grass blades in the quarters of the moon. What trash. What good did she ever do with all that?" Montag sat on the cold fender of the dragon, moving his head half an inch to the left, half an inch to the right. Left, right, left, right, left. "She saw everything. She didn't do anything to anyone. She just let them alone." "Alone, hell. She chewed around you, didn't she? One of those damn do-gooders with their shocked holier-than-thou silences, their one talent making others feel guilty. Damn, they rise like the midnight sun to sweat you in your bed." The front door opened. Mildred came down the steps, running, one suitcase held with a dream-like clinching rigidity in her fist as a beetle taxi hissed to the curb. "Mildred!" She ran past with her body stiff, her face floured with powder, her mouth gone, without lipstick. "Mildred, you didn't put in the alarm." She shoved the valise in the waiting beetle, climbed in, and sat mumbling, poor family. Oh, everything gone, everything gone now." Beatty grabbed Montag's shoulder as the beetle blasted away and hit 70 miles an hour, far down the street, gone. There was a crash like the falling parts of a dream fashioned out of warped glass, mirrors, and crystal prisms. Montag drifted about as if still another incomprehensible storm had turned him, to see stonemen in black wielding axes, shattering window panes to provide cross-ventilation, the brush of a death's head moth against a cold black screen. "Montag, this is Faber. Do you hear me? What's happening?" "This is happening to me," said Montag. "What a dreadful surprise," said Beatty, "for everyone nowadays knows, absolutely is certain, that nothing will ever happen to me. Others die. I go on. There are no consequences and no responsibilities, except that there are. But let's not talk about them, eh? By the time the consequences catch up with you, it's too late, isn't it, Montag?" "Montag, can you get away? Run?" asked Faber. Montag walked, but did not feel his feet touch the cement and then the night grasses. Beatty flicked his igniter nearby, and the small orange flame drew his fascinated gaze. What is there about fire that's so lovely? No matter what age we are, what draws us to it? Beatty blew out the flame and lit it again. It's perpetual motion. The thing man wanted to invent but never did, or almost perpetual motion. If you let it go on, it'd burn our lifetimes out. What is fire? It's a mystery. Scientists give us gobbledygook about friction and molecules, but they don't really know. Its real beauty is that it destroys responsibility and consequences. A problem gets too burdensome, then into the furnace with it. Now, Montag, you're a burden, and fire will lift you off my shoulders. Clean, quick, sure. Nothing to rot later. Antibiotic, aesthetic, practical. Montag stood looking in now at this queer house, made strange by the hour of the night, by murmuring neighbor voices, by littered glass, and there, on the floor, their covers torn off and spilled out like swan feathers, the incredible books that looked so silly and really not worth bothering with, for these were nothing but black type and yellowed paper and unraveled binding. Mildred, of course. She must have watched him hide the books in the garden and brought them back in. Mildred. "I want you to do this job all by your lonesome, Montag. Not with kerosene and a match, but piecework with a flamethrower. Your house, your cleanup." "Montag, can't you run? Get away?" "No," cried Montag helplessly. "The hound. Because of the hound." Faber heard, and Beatty, thinking it was meant for him, heard. Yes, the hound's somewhere around the neighborhood, so don't try anything. Ready? Ready. Montag snapped the safety catch on the flamethrower. Fire! A great nuzzling gout of flame leapt out to lap at the books and knock them against the wall. He stepped into the bedroom and fired twice, and the twin beds went up in a great simmering whisper, with more heat and passion and light than he would have supposed them to contain. He burnt the bedroom walls and the cosmetics chest, because he wanted to change everything, the chairs, the tables, and in the dining room the silverware and plastic dishes, everything that showed that he had lived here, in this empty house, with a strange woman who would forget him tomorrow, who had gone and quite forgotten him already, listening to her seashell radio pour in on her and in on her as she rode across town alone. And as before, it was good to burn. He felt himself gush out in the fire, snatch, rend, rip in half with flame, and put away the senseless problem. If there was no solution, well, then now there was no problem either. Fire was best for everything. The books, Montag. The books leapt and danced like roasted birds, their wings ablaze with red and yellow feathers. And then he came to the parlor, where the great idiot monsters lay asleep with their white thoughts and their snowy dreams. And he shot a bolt at each of the 3 blank walls, and the vacuum hissed out at him. The emptiness made an even emptier whistle, a senseless scream. He tried to think about the vacuum upon which the nothingness had performed, but he could not. He held his breath so the vacuum could not get into his lungs. He cut off its terrible emptiness, drew back, and gave the entire room a gift of one huge bright yellow flower of burning. The fireproof plastic sheath on everything was cut wide, and the house began to shudder with flame. "When you're quite finished," said Beatty behind him, "you're under arrest." Okay, let's pause there for a second. Oh dear, Montag's in a bit of a situation. Interesting thing, though, I asked you at the end of the last section, do you think Montag can do it? Do you think he can burn this house? Well, he sure did. He burnt his own house down. I think I went past it. Yes, I did. He burnt his own house down with a flamethrower, and he liked it. He enjoyed it. So when he burnt up the beds, he said he was surprised that they had so much heat and passion in them because his life with Mildred was so empty and cold. He wanted to burn everything that reminded him he lived here in this empty house with this strange woman. The woman who, when she abandoned him, just like got in the taxi and drove away, the only words that she had, the only grief and regret she expressed was for her television screens. Really? Anyways, it's about par for the course for Mildred. But point being, in the poor books, like roasted birds, their wings ablaze. It's a pretty graphic mental image, these kind of living things being roasted alive. But anyways, so Montag has burned his house down. He's under arrest. The hound is wandering around somewhere, so he can't just run. And I thought there was something else I wanted to say, but I guess not. Maybe it hasn't happened yet. Okay, so Beatty has pronounced Montag under arrest. So let's see what Montag's action is now. What do you do when you've been placed under arrest for something like this? The house fell in red coals and black ash. It bedded itself down in sleepy pink-gray cinders, and a smoke plume blew over it, rising and waving slowly back and forth in the sky. It was 3:30 in the morning. The crowd drew back into the houses. The great tents of the circus had slumped into charcoal and rubble, and the show was well over. Montag stood with the flamethrower in his limp hands, great islands of perspiration drenching his armpits, his face smeared with soot. The other firemen waited behind him, in the darkness, their faces illuminated faintly by the smoldering foundation. Montag started to speak twice, and then finally managed to put his thought together. "Was it my wife turned in the alarm?" Beatty nodded. "But her friends turned in an alarm earlier, that I let ride. One way or the other, you'd have got it. It's pretty silly, quoting poetry around free and easy like that. It was the act of a silly damn snob. Give a man a few lines of verse and he thinks he's the lord of all creation. You think you can walk on water with your books. Well, the world can get by just fine without them. Look where they got you, and slime up to your lip. If I stir slime with my little finger, you'll drown." Montag could not move. A great earthquake had come with fire and leveled the house, and Mildred was under there somewhere, and his entire life under there, and he could not move. The earthquake was still shaking and falling and shivering inside him, and he stood there, his knees half bent under the great load of tiredness and bewilderment and outrage, letting Beatty hit him without raising a hand. "Montag, "You idiot, Montag, you damn fool. Why did you really do it?" Montag did not hear. He was far away. He was running with his mind. He was gone, leaving this dead, soot-covered body to sway in front of another raving fool. "Montag, get out of there," said Faber. Montag listened. Beatty struck him a blow on the head that sent him reeling back. The green bullet in which Faber's voice whispered and cried fell to the sidewalk. Beatty snatched it up, grinning. He held it half in, half out of his ear. Montag heard the distant voice calling, "Montag, you all right?" Beatty switched the green bullet off and thrust it in his pocket. "Well, so there's more here than I thought. I saw you tilt your head, listening. First I thought you had a seashell, but when you turned clever later, I wondered. We'll trace this and drop it in on your friend." "No," said Montag. He twitched the safety catch on the flamethrower. Beatty glanced instantly at Montag's fingers, and his eyes widened the faintest bit. Montag saw the surprise there and himself glanced to his hands to see what new thing they had done. Thinking back later, he could never decide whether the hands or Beatty's reaction to the hands gave him the final push toward murder. The last rolling thunder of the avalanche stoned down about his ears, not touching him. Beatty grinned his most charming grin. "Well, that's one way to get an audience. Hold a gun on a man and force him to listen to your speech. Speech away. What'll it be this time? Why don't you belch Shakespeare at me, you fumbling snob? There is no terror, Cassius, in your threats, for I am armed so strong in honesty that they pass me by as an idle wind, which I respect not. How's that? Go ahead now, you second-hand litterateur. Pull the trigger." He took one step toward Montag. Montag only said, "We never burned right." "Hand it over, Guy," said Beatty with a fixed smile. And then he was a shrieking blaze, a jumping, sprawling, gibbering mannequin, no longer human or known, all writhing flame on the lawn, as Montag shot one continuous pulse of liquid fire on him. There was a hiss, like a great mouthful of spittle banging a red-hot stove, a bubbling and frothing as if salt had been poured over a monstrous black snail to cause a terrible liquefaction and a boiling over of yellow foam. Montag shut his eyes, shouted, and fought to get his hands at his ears to clamp and to cut away the sound. Beatty flopped over and over and over, and at last twisted in on himself like a charred wax doll and lay silent. The other two firemen did not move. Montag kept his sickness down long enough to aim the flamethrower. "Turn around!" They turned, their faces like blanched meat, streaming sweat. He beat their heads, knocking off their helmets and bringing them down on themselves. They fell and lay without moving. The blowing of a single autumn leaf. He turned, and the mechanical hound was there. It was half across the lawn, coming from the shadows, moving with such drifting ease that it was like a single solid cloud of black-gray smoke blown at him in silence. It made a single, last leap into the air, coming down at Montag from a good 3 feet over his head, its spidered legs reaching, the procaine needle snapping out its single angry tooth. Montag caught it with a bloom of fire, a single wondrous blossom that curled in petals of yellow and blue and orange about the metal dog, clad it in a new covering as it slammed into Montag and threw him 10 feet back against the bole of a tree, taking the flame gun with him. He felt it scrabble and seize his leg and stabbed the needle in for a moment before the fire snapped the hound up in the air, burst its metal bones at the joints, and blew out its interior in the single flushing of red color like a skyrocket fastened to the street. Montag lay, watching the dead, alive thing fiddle the air and die. Even now it seemed to want to get back at him and finish the injection, which was now working through the flesh of his leg. He felt all of the mingled relief and horror of having pulled back only in time to have just his knee slammed by the fender of a car, hurtling by at 90 miles an hour. He was afraid to get up, afraid he might not be able to gain his feet at all with an anesthetized leg, a numbness and a numbness hollowed into a numbness. And now, the street empty. The house burnt like an ancient bit of stage scenery, the other homes dark, the hound here, Beatty there, the 3 other firemen another place, and the salamander. He gazed at the immense engine. That would have to go too. "Well," he thought, "let's see how badly off you are. On your feet now. Easy, easy. There." He stood, and he had only one leg. The other was like a chunk of burnt pine log he was carrying along as penance for some obscure sin. When he put his weight on it, a shower of silver needles gushed up the length of the calf and went off in the knee. He wept. Come on, you can't stay here." A few house lights were going on again down the street. Whether from the incidents just past or because of the abnormal silence following the fight, Montag did not know. He hobbled across the ruins, seizing at his bad leg when it lagged, talking and whimpering and shouting directions at it and cursing it and pleading with it to work for him now when it was vital. He heard a number of people crying out in the darkness and shouting. He reached the backyard and the alley. Beatty, he thought, you're not a problem now. You always said, don't face a problem, burn it. Well, now I've done both. Goodbye, Captain. And he stumbled along the alley in the dark. Okay, let's pause once again. Very action-filled section here. We likely suspected that this section was called Burning Bright because of Montag's house, but it turns out that is not the only thing that burns in this section of the book. So first off, let's see. So Montag burns his house, and that's kind of a good thing. We find out that it was not just Mildred who was responsible for turning in the alarm, so we were wondering which one it was. Well, it wasn't just one of them. And then the thing that really kind of pushes Montag over the edge, as Faber is trying to continue to give him advice, when Beatty finds the little green bullet, the communications device, and threatens to trace it. Now it's not just Montag at stake. We'll trace this, drop in on your friend. Ooh, okay. So now Faber is in trouble. And that seems to revive some sort of survival instinct in Montag. And of course, like an idiot, Beatty gave him this flamethrower, which, given Montag's personality, Beatty would have never suspected Montag would use upon him. But when Beatty threatened someone else, Montag's caring for other humans revived itself. And even though he wouldn't have done something like this to save himself, it's a little different when you're trying to save a friend, pretty much the only friend Montag has at this point. So the scene where, the moment where Beatty is burned, for one thing, the lead up to this is interesting, I think. I mean, Beatty seems to have no fear, go ahead, pull the trigger. He's so confident, so arrogant in the lead up to this moment that it's kind of shocking, that suddenly he's a shrieking blaze, writhing flame on the lawn. The sounds that are described, I mean, I've never heard a person burned alive, but I have to imagine that between the screaming and the flame, charring the body, I mean, it has to be horrific. Montag just can't stand the sound. Beatty ends up like a charred wax doll, laying silent on the ground. Now, thankfully, Montag calms himself enough to only knock out the other firemen. He doesn't burn everything, but obviously the mechanical hound is a serious threat. Now, unfortunately for Montag, the mechanical hound is a very fast, sneaky thing, so it does actually get him a little bit. So he felt it scrabble and seize his leg and stab the needle in for a moment. Now, a moment isn't enough to kill him, because in small, reasonable amounts, procaine and morphine are painkillers. But there's enough procaine in his leg that he can't feel it anymore. And obviously, if you have just killed someone, you've just murdered someone, you really need two functional legs to be able to run effectively. So Montag kills the hound. I guess it wasn't really alive in the first place, but the dead alive thing. And his leg is just like completely incapacitated. He compares it to the feeling of having your knee slammed by the fender of a car hurtling by at 90 miles an hour. So now we need to see what happens to poor Montag as he attempts to escape from the scene of the crime. So he's stumbling pretty hard right now with his leg, but hopefully, morphine and procaine, their effects don't last forever. Hopefully he'll get his feeling back in time to, get away before further reinforcements arrive. All right. So I really like this description that's coming up where Montag is trying to describe the sensation in his leg. So just pay attention whenever we get to that section. I think it's on the next page. The feeling in his leg as he's, starting to recover use of it. A shotgun blast went off in his leg every time he put it down, and he thought, "You're a fool, a damn fool, an awful fool, an idiot, an awful idiot, a damn idiot and a fool, a damn fool. Look at the mess, and where's the mop? Look at the mess, and what do? Pride, damn it, and temper, and you've junked it all. At the very start, you vomit on everyone and on yourself, but everything at once, but everything one on top of another. Beatty, the women, Mildred, Clarice, everything. No excuse, though, no excuse. A fool, a damn fool. Go give yourself up. No, we'll save what we can. We'll do what there's left to do. If we have to burn, let's take a few more with us. Here." He remembered the books and turned back, just on the off chance. He found a few books where he had left them near the garden fence. Mildred, God bless her, had missed a few. 4 books still lay hidden where he had put them. Voices were wailing in the night, and flash beams swirled about. Other salamanders were roaring their engines far away, and police sirens were cutting their way across town with their sirens. Montag took the 4 remaining books and hopped his way down the alley, and suddenly fell, as if his head had been cut off and only his body lay there. Something inside had jerked him to a halt and flopped him down. He lay where he had fallen and sobbed, his legs folded, his face pressed blindly to the gravel. Beatty wanted to die. In the middle of the crying, Montag knew it for the truth. Beatty had wanted to die. He had just stood there, not really trying to save himself, just stood there, joking, needling, thought Montag, and the thought was enough to stifle his sobbing and let him pause for air. How strange to want to die so much that you let a man walk around armed, and then instead of shutting up and staying alive, you go on yelling at people and making fun of them until you get them mad, and then, at a distance, running feet. Montag sat up. "Let's get out of here. Come on, get up. You just can't sit." But he was still crying, and that had to be finished. He was going away now. He hadn't wanted to kill anyone, not even Beatty. His flesh gripped him and shrank away as if it had been plunged in acid. He gagged. He saw Beatty, a torch, not moving, fluttering out on the grass. He bit at his knuckles. I'm sorry, oh God, sorry." He tried to piece it all together, to go back to the normal pattern of life a few short days ago before the sieve and the sand, Denham's dentifrice, moth voices, fireflies, the alarms and excursions. Too much for a few short days, too much indeed for a lifetime. Feet ran in the far end of the alley. "Get up," he told himself. "Damn it, get up," he said to the leg and stood. The pains were spikes driven in the kneecap, and then only darning needles, and then only common ordinary safety pins, and after he had dragged along 50 more hops and jumps, filling his hand with slivers from the board fence, the prickling was like someone blowing a spray of scalding water on that leg, and the leg was at last his own leg again. He had been afraid that running might break the loose ankle. Now, sucking all the night into his open mouth and blowing it out pale, with all the blackness left heavily inside himself, he set out in a steady jogging pace. He carried the books in his hands. He thought of Faber. Faber was back there, in the steaming lump of tar that had no name or identity now. He had burnt Faber too. He felt so suddenly shocked by this that he felt Faber was really dead, baked like a roach in that small green capsule, shoved and lost in the pocket of a man who was now nothing but a framed skeleton strung with asphalt tendons. You must remember, burn them or they'll burn you, he thought. Right now it's as simple as that. He searched his pockets. The money was there. And in his other pocket he found the usual seashell upon which the city was talking to itself in the cold black morning. Police alert. Wanted. Fugitive in city. Has committed murder and crimes against the state. Name, Guy Montag. Occupation, fireman. Last seen. He ran steadily for 6 blocks in the alley, and then the alley opened out onto a wide, empty thoroughfare, 10 lanes wide. It seemed like a boatless river frozen there in the raw light of the high white arc lamps. You could drown trying to cross it, he felt. It was too wide. It was too open. It was a vast stage without scenery, inviting him to run across, easily seen in the blazing illumination, easily caught, easily shot down. The seashell hummed in his ear. Watch for a man running. Watch for the running man. Watch for a man alone, on foot. Watch. Montag pulled back into the shadows. Directly ahead lay a gas station, a great chunk of porcelain snow shining there, and 2 silver beetles pulling in to fill up. Now, he must be clean and presentable, if he wished to walk, not run, stroll calmly across that wide boulevard. It would give him an extra margin of safety if he washed up and combed his hair before he went on his way to get where? Yes, he thought. Where am I running? Nowhere. There was nowhere to go, no friend to turn to, really, except Faber. And then he realized that he was indeed running towards Faber's house instinctively. But Faber couldn't hide him. It would be suicide even to try. But he knew that he would go to see Faber anyway, for a few short minutes. Faber's would be the place where he might refuel his fast-draining belief in his own ability to survive. He just wanted to know that there was a man like Faber in the world. He wanted to see the man, alive and not burned back there like a body shelled in another body. And some of the money must be left with Faber, of course, to be spent after Montag ran on his way. Perhaps he could make the open country and live on or near the rivers and near the highways and the fields and hills. A great whirling whisper made him look to the sky. The police helicopters were rising so far away that it seemed someone had blown the gray head off a dry dandelion flower. 24 of them flurried, wavering, indecisive, 3 miles off, like butterflies puzzled by autumn. And then they were plummeting down to land, one by one, here, there, softly kneading the streets where, turned back to beetles, they shrieked along the boulevards, or as suddenly leapt back into the air, continuing their search. Okay, so that's where we stop as Montag approaches the gas station. So, no new serious developments except, yay, Montag can feel his leg again. But he does have this very interesting thought in the midst of his absorbing what's just happened. And that's that he believes that Beatty wanted to die. So the question of whether Beatty wanted to die is actually one of the questions that I ask you in part 3. I scrolled down to it before when I was showing the questions, and I was like, oh no, I don't want to give it away. So hopefully you didn't see it and get spoilers. But I want to know what you think. Do you agree? Do you agree with Montag's logic that because Beatty had handed him a weapon, I don't know where that came from, because Beatty had handed him a weapon, because Beatty was poking at him and prodding at him, that Beatty was trying to commit like suicide by fireman? Or do you see another possibility? Do you see, Beatty just being too arrogant or too cocky or too confident to think that Montag was going to go through with it? So either perspective is completely valid, but make sure to support your perspective with textual evidence from the book. So you are welcome to answer that question today if you would like to. There's no additional information with Beatty. He doesn't, show up anymore in the book. So that one you are welcome to go ahead and answer. Number 1 you may want to wait on, but that last one you could go ahead and knock out. Let's see. Nothing else serious here. Obviously the police are after him. Big surprise. The police do mention, or rather the radio mentions, watch for a man running. So that's why Montag says that, if he is going to make it to Faber's, across the city, across this huge boulevard in front of him, he's like, now I need to walk everywhere that I go. If I run, I automatically paint like a target on my back. So if I'm going to get anywhere, I should be walking calmly. I'm just walking across the street to get to my car, just very casually. And he does want to clean up a little bit. He's probably covered in ash and soot and stuff from the fire. Maybe even some bits and pieces of Beatty, who knows? But he needs to clean up. So the gas station, hopefully he can clean up there and then maybe make his way to Faber's. That's really his only hope now. So we'll see if Faber can help him in